The AiMS system, originally envisaged as a system to facilitate the scheduling and monitoring of coordinated coverholder audits in the Lloyd's market. The advent of the TOM program has seen the scope of the system expand to cover non-coordinated coverholder audits, TPA audits, and is designed to allow the London company market to participate in the future. Logging in. AiMS is a web-based application. Access is controlled through the LAF portal using existing Lloyds.com registration details. Users include Lloyds carriers, Lloyds managing agents, and London market companies, such as auditors, brokers, and cover holders. Within each user group, there are different categories with varying levels of access and permissions. Currently, manager and user. Data. The majority of data used in AiMS is obtained from regular drawdowns from BAR. This is another reason that we remind the audience to ensure that BAR is as up-to-date and accurate as possible. Some is inputted directly by the users, as you would have seen in Lena's brief overview of system workflows. AiMS application flow. We will look at these workflows in a little more detail here. Ahead of the audit scheduling, which is the primary purpose of the system, there are a number of information gathering tasks. At each stage of the task, the system will generate a notification email. Auditor RFI. Auditor RFIs, otherwise known as a request for information, shows the process through which we gather auditors' details, from general corporate company information to the skill sets on offer for audit services and indicative pricing. This provides carriers information against which to perform due diligence and provides reference points for suitability in the respect of proposed audits. New auditors can be added to the system at any time. Any auditor seeking to be included should be sponsored by a carrier that has undertaken due diligence on the auditor in question and assigned audit work that has been completed to their satisfaction. Audit panel request. Carriers have the opportunity to record their audit panels. It is not mandatory and will not affect the outcome of the scheduling process. However, the audit panel information is used to provide easy-to-use indicators during the schedule review process. Audit cycle request. Carriers also have the opportunity to record their proposed audit cycle for their cover holders over the coming years. Again, it is not mandatory and does not affect the outcome of the scheduling process. However, the cycle for other market participants with relationships with the same cover holders can be viewed through a report and can therefore be used to align audit cycles across the market. Cover holder unavailability dates. The cover holder themselves also have the opportunity to indicate dates that are unsuitable for an audit visit. These dates are deliberately limited to ensure that only genuine cases can be recorded. No more than 4 blocks of dates, which themselves can add up to a maximum of 28 days. Although the system is set up to give all cover holders and ultimately TPAs access, it will operate in the same way as Atlas, in that the brokers can access and complete tasks on behalf of their cover holder clients if they have been so instructed. Update scheduling info. The coordinated audit scheduling for an up-and-coming year will be initiated by Lloyds, typically around June and July of the preceding year. A task is generated for each selected carrier which lists all of the cover holders that they have a lead relationship with that also have a lead relationship with another carrier according to BAR. The carrier will then select whether or not each cover holder should be subject to audit, and if so, who their preferred auditor and quarter is. If they have no preference in respect of auditor or quarter, or both, the fields can be left blank and the carrier will be bound by the resolved choice based on the preferences of the other carriers. Once completed, the list is submitted back to Lloyds for inclusion in the scheduling algorithm. Scheduling. The scheduling algorithm determines which auditors will be assigned to coordinated audits and when those audits should take place on predetermined rules. Firstly, the cover holders are grouped together into audit groups by Lloyds based on our knowledge and experience to ensure that, where appropriate, branch offices of the same cover holder or even corporate entities within the same functional group are, wherever practicable, audited by the same auditor at the same time to gain maximum efficiencies. Firstly, the auditor choice. A simple vote. Each participating carrier has a single vote per cover holder. Carriers, therefore, can have multiple votes within groups depending on how many of the group members they have relationships with. The auditor with the most votes is carried forward as the resolved auditor. In the event of a tie, the choices are weighed by the EPI of all the binding authorities lead by each carrier with that cover holder. In the unlikely event that a tie persists, the audit is referred back to Lloyds to come to a decision in consultation with the participating carriers. And secondly, the quarter choice. The earliest quarter chosen by any of the participants is the quarter chosen. Lloyds runs the algorithm once all of the carriers have submitted their preferences. The system has the option built into the functionality to push the algorithm if a small number of carriers have not submitted by the prescribed deadline. In those circumstances, the carriers that have not submitted will have their entire cover holder population carried through to the algorithm as a yes, i.e. selected for an audit in the next cycle, but with no preferences as to the audit or quarter. This will not tie those carriers into participating on those audits, as there is the option to opt out of coordinated audits. However, it does mean that those errant carriers have missed the opportunity to influence the resolved choices. Once the algorithm has run, Lloyds will review the output to address any anomalies, such as cases where no preference has been expressed by the participant or where the application of the algorithm has produced no clear winner. Once these anomalies have been rectified, the resolved choices can be sent out to the carriers for review and ratification. When the carriers receive the resolved output for the coordinated audit they have chosen, they review each one and can either accept or reject the system-generated audits. Again, once all audits have been marked as either accepted or rejected, the list can be submitted for further processing. The responses will be held until all carriers have completed and submitted their list. As with the original preferences, the system allows Lloyds to push the schedule process to the next stage in the event that a carrier or carriers have not submitted. In these circumstances, any carriers who have not submitted will have all of the audits in their schedule auto-accepted. The system then collates the responses. If all participants on an audit accept the system-generated allocations, then the audit instructions is routed directly to the chosen auditor. If one of the participants rejects the generated allocations, then the audit is routed to Lloyds, who will then resolve the issue in consultation with the participants. When an audit instruction is routed to an auditor, there will be an email notification and a corresponding task. In that task, the auditor can either accept or reject the instruction, depending on their capacity to successfully conduct the audit. Accepted audits are now scheduled and will appear in the reports of the carrier and the auditor. Rejected audits get routed back to Lloyds for reallocation based on the other preferences expressed by the participants and the known capacity of the auditors. As well as the coordinated cover holder audits, the system holds information on and allows carriers to issue instruction for cover holder audits where they are the only participant. These will be audits where they are the only market lead with the cover holder in question, and audits where they have either opted out of the coordinated audit or specifically chosen to conduct an audit separately from the market. These are designated as self-managed audits. There is no task initiated. The carrier can simply access their list of solo and self-managed audits at any time, select an auditor and preferred quarter, and submit that instruction directly to the selected auditor. If the auditor accepts the instruction, it becomes inactive in the carrier's list and appears in the carrier's and auditor's reports of scheduled audits. If the auditor rejects the audit or does not action the instruction before the deadline, the audit will revert to the carrier for reassignment. Carrier scope entry. Now the simple task of scheduling is complete, the system can turn its attention to the more complicated tasks of scoping, quoting, and the recording and issuance of recommendations. The functionality we will cover from here on will be released as part of Phase 2. As such, this will serve as a brief overview, and the screens displayed may be subject to some change prior to going live. The scoping activity will be triggered 90 days ahead of the proposed audit. Therefore, for audits due in Q4, the task will trigger at the start of Q3. Carriers will receive a notification and a scoping task for each up-and-coming audit. The audits would have been subject to grouping, so any scoping task will include all of the pins selected for audit that constitute an audit group and all of those pins associated UMRs, including the runoff UMRs, as applicable to the carrier completing the task. The carrier is able to enter the details of the appropriate point or points of contact for arranging the audit and record their internal risk rating for the cover holder or group. The common/operational scope elements, Section 2 of the current Lloyd's scope, are applied at a group level. The binder-specific elements of the underlying UMRs are scoped individually down to the number and types of files or documents to be included in the review. The primary scoping is based on the market-established standard scope. We recognise that this is not always going to meet the entire needs of the carrier. Subsequently, the system will allow carriers to draft and save bespoke elements, which can range of 1 or 2 additional questions to entire sections that can be applied as required. Auditor quote. Once scoping is completed, it can be submitted. The chosen auditor will receive all of the submitted scopes as a single task once all participants have completed them, at which point they will be able to produce a quote for the requested audit. If any of the participating carriers do not submit their scope within the set deadline, the quote task will be initiated without their inclusion. The auditor will enter a quote by section for the common elements, which will be prorated over the number of participants that have requested that section for coordinated audits. The UMR-specific and bespoke elements will simply be quoted based on the requested work, and these are combined when sent to the carriers for review. During the quoting process, the auditor can request additional information or clarification from the carriers, and if the auditor has a reasonably clear idea of what they may be, they can include an estimate of associated expense. Quote review. The quotations provided by the auditors are reviewed by the carriers. The carriers can request additional information, accept the quote, reject it, or revisit their original scoping requirements at any time. If a quote is rejected on a coordinated audit, the case is referred to Lloyd's to facilitate a resolution. Carrier rejection. When the CAF team open the case, 3 options are available to handle the rejection. Firstly, to resolve the discrepancy at hand and continue with the same auditor. Secondly, if the discrepancy is unable to be resolved, a new auditor will be assigned. This will create a new case which will be routed to the new assigned auditor. And thirdly, to opt the carrier out. In the event of this action being executed, the AQR status will be changed to resolved opt-out, and a recalculation will be performed in quote. Auditor site visit. Once an audit instruction has been accepted and its scope and terms have been agreed and the associated task completed, the auditor can go about making the arrangements for the on-site visit. Once dates have been agreed and booked, they will be recorded via site visit task. But up until the point that the auditor goes on site, a carrier that either originally stated they didn't want to audit or opted out of the coordinated audit or has entered into a new relationship with the cover holder can opt in to the audit subject to the auditor agreeing that they have capacity to accommodate them. Likewise, a carrier can opt out of a coordinated audit up to the point where an auditor goes on site. However, it should be stressed that if this is at a point after which the auditor has started their preparation work, they would be perfectly justified in charging for any costs incurred. Findings and review. After the review has been completed, the findings and recommendations can be documented and the system will facilitate their distribution to the participating carriers. The carrier will review the findings and recommendations and come up with remedial actions and timescales for their implementation. These will be input onto the system and much the same way that consolidated letters are currently produced. Lloyds will generate and issue a single document to the cover holder and their associated brokers. Each recommendation raised will also be issued to the cover holders in the form of a task with associated actions and deadlines that the cover holder or their broker can complete and submit back to the appropriate carriers. Where the audit is solo or self-managed, the system will still be used to generate a standard format recommendation letter. Responses to the requested actions and any supporting evidence can be uploaded to the system by the cover holder or the broker, and the system will track the progress of these responses until they have been signed off as closed. Documentation upload. The system acts as a document repository for information that can aid the audit preparation and support the on-site review. The auditor can upload documentation as part of the site visit task. However, any stakeholder associated with the cover holder to be audited can upload documentation at any time. Documents can be uploaded using the drag and drop or browse and select options. Thank you for watching the AiMS video.